My name's Alfie Vick. I'm faculty here at CED, and I'm the director of our Environmental Ethics Certificate Program. And on behalf of CED, I wanted to welcome you to our lecture this evening. I'm glad to see so many students and faculty and alumni and friends here. And also wanted to thank Dean Sonia Hurt for her leadership in bringing Tim here tonight. This lecture is supported by the Jonathan Grover Seymour Program Fund, which was established here at CED in 1994, and it supports special events and other activities that enhance the academic endeavors of the college. So I wanted to thank the creators of that fund, and I think what we'll have tonight will honor that the establishment of that fund. This event is also a part of our ongoing celebration of the 50th anniversary of the CED, which was founded as the School of Environmental Design back in 1969. And of course, it's been 50 years now that we've been a standalone unit on campus. We've got events going on all year long. Like I said, this event is a part of our ongoing 50th anniversary celebration. And we've got many more events planned throughout the remainder of the spring semester, culminating with a gala on April 4th, and hopefully we'll see many of you there. So please check our CED website for announcements and a calendar of all of our other upcoming events that are scheduled. But this evening, it's my honor to introduce Tim Beatley. Tim Beatley is the Teresa Heinz Professor of Sustainable Communities in the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning in the School of Architecture at UVA, University of Virginia, where he's taught for around 30 years. Yeah. He earned his PhD in City and Regional Planning from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Tim's work focuses on the subject of sustainable communities and creative strategies by which cities and towns can fundamentally reduce their ecological footprints while at the same time becoming more livable and equitable places. And his work shows us that biophilic cities are places that support planetary health and human flourishing, which of course is the title of his talk today. And Tim is the global expert on this topic. He's the author of more than 15 books related to integrating nature into cities. Many of them are over in our Owens Library, just down the hall right here. Some of them are on display in the glass case in front. He's also the founder and director of Biophilic Cities, which is a global network of cities that are working to conserve and celebrate nature in cities, working towards resilience and human health. And we'll hear more about that this evening. So with that, please help me welcome Tim. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Sonia, wherever you are, for inviting me. Lovely, and Alfie as well, and Steve Nygren. I want to just give a shout out to you in the audience. The founder of Serenbe is here. I've got one slide with you giving one of your famous tours of Serenbe. It's towards the end. So in the time that I have, we have about an hour. Is that right? I won't use up the whole hour. Hopefully, with presenting, we'll leave some time for questions and discussion at the end. But I am kind of notorious for having way too many slides for the time that I have, and I think that's probably true for this evening. So my goals would be several. One is to get you all comfortable. I think that will be easy given what I've heard here already, comfortable with the word biophilic and applying it to cities. And I frequently say that you should, your assignment today or your assignment later is to find someone else to talk about biophilia, biophilic, use that word in a casual conversation would be a good thing to do. But I want to tell you about this network of cities. We have 22, almost 23rd city just joining, actually just got their application yesterday. So a growing network of cities, and tell you about that. And along the way, tell you what cities are up to. What are the innovative and interesting things they're doing to incorporate nature into their design and planning. And along the way, really a discussion about what it means to be a biophilic place. So to start, for me, I'm an urban planner, and we are talking a lot about sustainable cities and resilient cities and the need to use land wisely, to live more densely and compactly when we think about what it's going to take to profoundly reduce our ecological footprints and our carbon footprints. We need to be walking and bicycling and living more densely, basically. And so that's frequently what we're arguing for in terms of a future vision of place. But if we're living more densely and compactly, does that mean that we can't have that close, deep connection with the natural world? Well, we've got a question mark here, but take that away. We really think that we must design and plan in ways that bring the compactness and the nature together. So biophilia, we have to give some credit to Ed Wilson, E.O. Wilson at Harvard. He wasn't the first person to use this term, but he's really the one who's coined it in the way that we think of it today, which is this innate connection to nature, that we are drawn to nature and natural and living things, that we are happier and healthier and able to lead more meaningful lives when we have nature all around us. And it can't just be nature that you get on a holiday once or twice a year. The challenge is that it has to be all around us where we're living and working. And so we have to have it. We have to have that dose of multiple doses of nature daily, if not hourly. So around 2011, we started something called the Biophilic Cities project at UVA, which really led to this network, which I'll tell you more about. Here's an image of Ed Wilson. The human species has grown up in nature. So this notion that we are carrying with us our ancient brains, that we're really hardwired to need and want that connection with nature. And I think for most of us that's obvious in our daily lives. What is it that we're drawn to? What is it that makes us feel better? What is it that calms us? And for me, it's all of these things, and it's water and flowers and trees and birds and all those things that also make life meaningful to us. Steve Kellert, who was a hero for a lot of us, and another person who really helped to kind of popularize the idea of biophilic design. He's passed away, unfortunately, but remains an inspiration for us. And Steve frequently said that biophilia was something that was a weak genetic tendency. It was sometimes the way he would phrase it. And by that he didn't mean it wasn't important. He meant that even though we have this with us all the time, it's innate. It's like a muscle. So we need to cultivate it. And that's a lot of the definition of what a biophilic city is nurturing, cultivating, inducing us to exercise that biophilic muscle, if you will. So this is an image actually that reminds me of that. I'm going to show you a few images that have to do or come from some of the films that we've been making. So that one of the ways I think we've effectively been telling stories is through documentary films, and I'm going to give you a few examples of that. But this is an interesting one. So we have a new film called Ocean Cities, which is about connecting cities perched on the marine edge with the amazing marine nature around them. And we premiered it last fall at the Virginia Film Festival, and you can now find it online. But this is an image from one of our shoots in Miami, and we spent a day at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Nature Center, and we followed these fifth graders as they walked into the Atlantic Ocean. And it was an epiphany to me to kind of watch their reactions to the marine nature. So they went on into the water. We were kind of following them with cameras and trying to make sure that the cameras stayed dry, and an interesting challenge to keep up with them. So every group had a naturalist. And each pair of kids was given a net, and they were encouraged to scoop the bottom of the ocean and pull up see what they could find in the way of nature. And so at a certain point, one child pulls up the net, and you see this thing that to me looked like a slightly overinflated tennis ball. And it turned out to be a pufferfish. And they have each group had a little floating receptacle, basically, and the child put it back in the water, and it became, in the minds of the kids, it returned to being a fish. They saw it as a fish. And this was really a miraculous thing. And you could hear it in their oohs and ahs and their kind of verbal reactions, but in their faces as well. It was a moment of wonder. And most of these kids had actually never had any direct contact with water, even though they didn't live very far away. They were largely from underserved neighborhoods in the Miami area. So it's a reminder that the biophilic instinct, it is innate, but it does require opportunities, and it does require some teaching and mentoring and nudging. So we could spend the whole night talking about the evidence, which is accumulating pretty fast, it seems almost on a daily basis, if certainly a weekly or monthly new evidence coming out. And I think it matches that intuition, those intuitions we have about how nature affects us. This is one example from a bioscience study that shows that in greener neighborhoods, more natureful neighborhoods, you have lower levels of depression, anxiety, and stress. Again, not too surprising. A lot of evidence about the power of walking in nature. Some of you know about the forest bathing research that's come out of Japan. What they've found over a long period of time is at the end of that walk through a forest, at the end of it, your hormone stress levels go down. That walk boosts your immune system. And the Japanese are so convinced about it that they've set up a network of forest bathing therapy stations in cities in that country. So we don't entirely understand the causal dynamic at work here, but we're getting big clues about it, and learning more every month or two, it seems, as well. We've gotten to know this guy, Richard Taylor, who chairs the physics department at the University of Oregon, and he's pretty convincing about what he believes a key element is the fractal geometry that we find in nature, shapes and forms of nature in the form of fractals. And he argues pretty convincingly that we as a species have developed a visual system to easily process those fractals. So not surprising that we are calmer, that seeing nature, watching nature has these positive effects. You may know his name. He got a lot of publicity a few years ago for having developed a computer program for analyzing the fractal quality of Jackson Pollock paintings, which is really interesting. There's a side story. He's helping to identify forgeries, in fact, through this fractal, this software that he's developed. And this is during the time when Pollock was painting and doing this drop method, which apparently are higher in fractal content and helps to explain why it is we seem to like those paintings. Anyway, a lot of evidence now about the power of birdsong, that the same positive effects, reduced heart rate and blood pressure and the calming effects of hearing birdsong. And actually hospitals now in the UK that are recording birdsong and piping it at key times, children's hospitals where stressful times when kids are going into surgery or getting inoculated. We're learning a lot more about the sound and the multi-sensory dimensions of biophilia. So not long ago, we did a presentation for a health company called Moda in the Northwest, and we were trying to figure out how to summarize all this incredible literature, and you can't really put it on one slide. But we started kind of listing the evidence and all of the outcomes and the ways that nature affects us, and it is really quite remarkable. I like the last one, increased laughter and joy. We have evidence now that in the presence of nature we are more likely to be generous. In the presence of nature we're more likely to be cooperative. We are more likely to be creative. Scores on creative indices go up in the presence of nature. So it seems that nature helps us to be better human beings. And that's, I think, a key point. How to summarize all of this for us, the word flourishing is something that captures it all, because we want places that are not just about happiness and pleasure in the narrow sense, but also meaning and purpose. And so flourishing tends to capture a lot of this. So a biophilic city is a flourishing city, we would say. So this idea is gaining traction. We have gotten some good publicity over the last few months from stories in Fast Company and Grist and in other places. And the world is paying attention and looking at nature, in fact, through looking at cities through a nature lens is something we certainly see that happening more and more. I do want to make the point that there are a lot of reasons why we need nature, of course, and as we face a daunting challenge of climate change, as we both work on the mitigation and the adaptation challenges, nature is not the only thing that we can do, but it's one of the most effective things that we can do. This is an image actually from Rotterdam, where they have been using green walls and green rooftops and doing a number of things to enhance nature, but also to retain stormwater and manage floodwaters and sea level rise. So almost anything that you can do to make your city more biophilic will make it more resilient. We need to plant more trees and protect the trees that we have, for example, as a response to the urban heat problem. So gaining traction, I've kind of already made this point. I was impressed that summer before last, the International Federation of Landscape Architects, how many are landscape architects in the audience? Well, this is the big international congress, and it happened in Singapore, and I was amazed that they chose Biophilic Cities as their theme. And I thought that was a pretty good sign that maybe we were doing well. Somehow I skipped over that slide. So we certainly have seen a dramatic uptick in the application of biophilic design, and we frequently blend all of this together and talk about biophilic design and planning. But wonderful work that's been happening largely in the architectural world and at the building scale. We've gotten to know the designer here, Ty Farrow, and this is a wonderful it's actually a cancer center, and he tells the story of when they were designing it, of consulting the patients and families of patients about what kind of a building they should create and what the patients and families wanted. And they kept telling Ty, we want a building that will give us hope as we come into this really stressful time in life. And he said, well, what would give you hope? And they told him, well, aliveness. Aliveness will give us hope. And aliveness is biophilia. And it is living nature, certainly, but it's also shapes and forms and materials that we connect with, that resonate, that touch us deeply. And wood is one of those. So this is a wonderful example of cross-laminated timber creating basically an atrium that looks and feels like a forest, and much appreciated. We've just come back last week actually from we're making a little film about the Center for Sustainable Landscapes at the Phipps Conservatory in Pittsburgh, and Richard Piacentini has been a colleague and a supporter of this idea. It's really a wonderful example of a work environment where you have operable windows, where no one is sitting very far away from a window, wonderful views of nature, a wonderful green roof. It's a living building, and it has a number of really interesting green features. And actually a sound installation that brings nature sounds from around Pittsburgh into the interior space of the building. So there are many examples of biophilic buildings that I could give you and talk about. Well, one thing we say is that we would like every building to be biophilic, and a biophilic city, one definition or one aspect of a biophilic city is it's a city that has lots of biophilic buildings, right? So, but it's got to be a lot more than that. So this is another example. These are renderings, and it hasn't been built yet, but it's just been approved by the City of Toronto. And I want to just talk a little bit about it because it's interesting how it happened. So we've gotten to know Brian Brisbane, the principal designer of this building, and he was really taken by the Bosco Verticali project in Milan, these twin forested towers. How many of you have seen images of those if you're following the kind of biophilic design world? It made quite a splash, and Stefano Boeri is building them, similar structures around the world. Brian was taken by this, but he couldn't find much published technical material about Bosco Verticali, so he decided he was going to move to Milan, and he rented an apartment in one of the towers, and he basically took it apart. I think he put it back together again as well, but he just to figure out how it worked, and he discovered that a lot of the companies providing a lot of the systems and the wind tunnel tests and were Canadian. So he came back to Toronto and decided that he was going to design one that improved on the design of Bosco Verticali. And I think he has, and it has a number of really interesting elements. And we've got an article actually in the current issue of our online journal, Biophilic Cities, if you're interested. Plug-and-play trees, actually indentations in the floor plates of the building so that you plant right into the floor plate. So it's not, Bosco Verticali has these raised bed planters. So it's very elegant. What's interesting is that when you propose a high-rise building, usually in a single-family residential neighborhood, that's not usually a popular thing to do. And the NIMBYism usually kicks in. And as Brian describes the process, the neighbors, the planning department actually became the obstacle, and the neighborhood actually rose up and advocated for this tower because they saw this as a kind of green hillside. They saw it as an improvement to the neighborhood. So really interesting. I think that's what biophilic buildings can do. So, but we are interested in all those spaces beyond the building, between the buildings, to paraphrase Jan Gehl, the life from the interior, the room, the building, to the region and the bioregion and maybe beyond, and all the levels between. And it is about buildings, but it's also about gardens and trees and nature, outdoor nature, all those things. And for us, a biophilic city is a city that connects us to the natural world, but it also connects us to each other through nature. Nature has that unusual power, that special power to bring us together as human beings. We also argue that this vision is an important one from a conservation point of view, as we are facing a global crisis when it comes to biodiversity, and we have to begin to understand cities as biological arcs, as places where we design, we share space with many other forms of life, and we design for those other forms of life and make that an important part, actually, of what a city is. And it's partly an ethical, ethical dimension to this in the sense of the need to coexist and to plan for coexistence and to care for nature. So the vision, and this is an image from Singapore, the Park Royal Hotel. The vision is really one of moving from the idea that cities are places where you find occasional bits of nature to beginning to understand the city as nature. The city is a natural system. It is, we know that, and there is a lot of nature already within the city. But this idea that you've got a city with a park, you've got to get to that nature somewhere. You walk down the road to find it. Maybe there's some trees, maybe there's a park. We believe our vision of biophilic cities is one where we want immersive nature. We don't just want to be able to walk to that park. We want to think of that city as a park. We want to live in the park. We want to live in the garden. We want to live in the forest. Atlanta is the city in the forest, right? In fact, we're going back in some ways to a vision that many cities had before. And cities like Singapore has actually officially changed their motto from Singapore, a garden city, to Singapore, a city in a garden. And that seems like a small change, but it's really profound. And so now they're actually saying they aspire to being a biophilic city in a garden, which we think maybe is a little redundant, but that's okay. We like that kind of redundancy. So a lot of programs and policies and creative things that cities like Singapore are doing to implement this idea. So in the case of Park Royal, they have something called the landscape replacement policy. So whenever you build a building in that city, you have to at least replace the lost nature at the ground level, the footprint of the building. So in the case of this building, you can see a little bit of the nature, and they don't even get credit for the hanging nature. This is counted by kind of what you can count the area as you look down on the building. So more than 200% replacement of ground level nature. There's an interesting friendly competition taking place now. I guess I have an image a little bit later of the Oasia Hotel, which has replaced nature 1,300%. So the whole idea of incorporating nature into the vertical realm. There are other cities that are also embracing this immersive nature. This is an example from Melbourne. They have adopted a new urban forest plan that aspires to doubling their tree canopy coverage by 2040. That's impressive, but more impressive to us is that they are not just imagining planting more trees. It's not just that they want more trees in the city. They want to be a city in a forest, and that's their vision of immersive nature. And by the way, some really creative ways of engaging the public around trees and nature. So in Melbourne, they mapped every existing tree, and they gave each tree its own email address, and you were encouraged to send a loving email to your favorite tree. That's biophilia. And the tree responds to all the emails, which is interesting. So they got loving notes from all over the world, actually. So we think of a biophilic city, again, as a city of shared nature, as a place where making room for other forms of life is not just going to make us happier, which it will, but it's also an ethical obligation. So we have wonderful stories. Austin, Texas is now in our network. Many of you know about the 1.5 million Mexican free-tailed bats that arrived unannounced and took up residence under the Congress Avenue Bridge. This is some years ago now. Just happened that the renovation of the bridge created crevices that were just the right size for the bats. The first instinct of the city, of course, was to eradicate the bats. It's a health hazard. It's a longer story. This guy, Merlin Tuttle, we filmed this story. It moved Bat Conservation International to Austin and helped the city, I think, move from a position of biophobia to biophilia. And so now the bats are beloved, and they arrive, every late spring, summer, and every evening as the sun goes down, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people arrive to watch the bats emerge. And they've gone a little bit bat crazy in Austin. They've named their hockey team after the bats. There are 2 or 3 bat watching dinner cruises that you can engage in. Anyway, it's a wonderful story. And other cities in our network have similar stories. This is a story from St. Louis. This is Catherine Warner on the right, who is the sustainability director for the city of St. Louis. And the now former Mayor Slay, Mayor of St. Louis, set a goal for planting a certain number of monarch butterfly gardens in the city. And it's quite wonderful to watch that happen. Mayors make lots of promises. Planting butterfly gardens, not usually on the list, but they've achieved their goal. They've actually, the goal was 250. I think they've now got 400 or so. You can find them all online. It's been a wonderful way of engaging the public around biodiversity and biophilia. I've been writing a book about birds in cities and been thinking a lot about birds. And so we have to make sure that we design everything in cities that is not just less harmful for birds, but accommodates birds and creates new habitat for birds. And these are actually 2 images from 2 stories we tell in films. We filmed the latest, these are from Portland, Oregon, I should say. Portland has a very active bird conservation community, and they've kind of pioneered this idea of catios. These are cat patios, and so they every year have a catio tour. So your dream catio, the 10 catios that you buy a ticket and you follow them. You go to all 10. And wonderful story of the Chapman Elementary School. There are these wonderful Vox's swifts that migrate through Portland, and every evening in September they take up residence in several places, but very visually, very dramatically in this chimney of a local school, and people come out every evening to watch it. So as the sun goes down, you get this big swirl, and then the birds drop into this chimney, and they're 6, 7, sometimes 10,000 in that chimney. I've become a major fan of bird-friendly design. We have, wonderful examples like the Jacob Javits Center. New York is not yet in our network. We're hoping they will be, but the retrofitting of all of the glass, essentially installing fritted bird-friendly glass. And interestingly enough, very effective, 90% reduction in bird mortality, and even though it costs a little bit more, they're finding their carbon footprint and their energy consumption going down. And here you go, a 26% reduction in the energy consumption of the building. So you may have heard the city of New York has now become the second, well, I guess San Francisco, another of our partner cities, was the first to adopt a bird-friendly design ordinance, mandatory bird-friendly design. New York is the newest, biggest city, really, to do it. So beginning in December, all buildings and major renovations from the ground up to 75 feet, which is the critical zone, strike zone, 90% of that has to be fritted and bird-friendly glass. So New York is really setting the standard. By the way, in the Javits retrofit, they installed a 6-acre plus green roof that's actually nesting space, nesting habitat for birds as well. So it's actually adding to habitat. So I added a few slides about this because I think this is really something interesting to talk about. So I've mentioned the word awe, wonder and awe, but this idea that we design for awe, can we think about cities designed for awe? And what is awe? Well, there's Rich Louv in his new book, Our Wild Calling. Something unexpected, stimulates a sense of vastness, something that induces a kind of sense of humility, something that breaks us out of the sense of superiority, maybe, that idea of vastness. And one way I define a biophilic city is it's a city that creates many opportunities over the course of the day to have an experience of awe, maximizing moments of awe. You can't see this very well, but this is one of my students on a bird watching trip. I love that expression. That is awe. And we have actually, and here's I sometimes say a constellation of terms and experiences that are kind of wrapped up in that awe, including magic. And there actually is quite a bit of emerging evidence about what that experience does for us. And there's a pleasurable part of it, but what's interesting to me is that the stimulating of awe serves to helps to make us more generous as human beings. And this is one study, Paul Piff and his group at Irvine, showing that by diminishing the emphasis on the individual self, awe may encourage people to forego strict self-interest to improve the welfare of others. If we want if we want pro-social behavior, we want folks to care about climate change, to work on behalf of restoration and protecting the environment, moments of awe actually end up being quite interesting. So we tried to capture a lot of that bird. The Vox's Swifts story from Portland is one example of that. This is actually a new one that's just coming online this week. I'm not sure whether we've uploaded it, but a film about Gotham. Gotham Whale is a nonprofit in New York City, started by that guy. And how many of you know about Gotham Whale? The numbers of whale sightings in the waters around New York has gone up dramatically in recent years, and thanks to Paul, there are now whale watching tours and a lot of new awareness about this, and people are looking for, you can actually have sightings as you're taking a ferry through the city. The idea that you might actually see a humpback whale or a dolphin in the waters of New York is kind of an odd thought to a lot of, I think, even a lot of New Yorkers. So it's really interesting. Why is this happening? Well, when you start improving the water quality in a harbor like this and a water system like this, and the menhaden have come back, and that's what the whales are coming for, the food. But it's a really interesting element of awe in a dense, highly populated city. So that's another film I'd love for you to watch. So we think of the nature in a city. The Biophilic Cities lens suggests that there is nature everywhere, right? And it's not just the park, the spaces where we find birds. And here actually the city of Pittsburgh has joined our network, and they're doing a number of wonderful things and a lot of different ways of thinking about nature in the city, connections to water, very biophilic, parks that are resilient, floodable parks, even a water trail, and designing for birds. So they actually have 150 swift towers, partly a compensation for the loss for the capping of chimneys and tree cavities. But that nature in a biophilic city could be, on the bridge. It could be under the, bridge. It could be in a space that may not seem like the typical kind of nature. We believe that a biophilic city is a city that directly engages the population. So this is a debate we've been having. Is a biophilic city simply a city that is highly natureful? We have lots of examples of cities where there's lots of nature, but the population is disengaged perhaps from that. So the idea of biophilia and biophilic design is about how engaged are human beings in that nature. Do we care about that nature? Can we identify common species of birds and flowers and trees? How much time do we spend caring for nature or engaging nature? These are all metrics that we explore in the Biophilic Cities network. This is another partner city example, Reston, Virginia. Not a large city, about 60,000 now, I guess. And half the population, they say, has some direct engagement with nature over the course of a year. They have a very active nature center, and they've actually just gone through a really interesting biophilic pledge campaign, actually asking residents to commit to doing a certain number of things on a list of activities. A biophilic city is definitely, I've said that it's an immersive nature. It's this idea also that you have nature at multiple scales and multiple geographical levels. You can walk out your door or your work, have that nature around you, and then move to progressively larger amounts of nature as you move away from that spot. So Helsinki is the background image here, the idea that you could start in the dense urban core and actually walk out, reaching old growth forest at the edge of that city. So networks of interconnected nature, sometimes a whole of city approach is what we say as well. So another way to think about this is what are the interventions, or what are the different urban nature elements? This is certainly not a comprehensive list, and this is actually from a set of workshops that we did last week in Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods, and we got a few of those neighborhoods in a room and got them to start to think about, if you were to imagine a biophilic neighborhood, your neighborhood becoming a biophilic neighborhood, what would some of the things be? And it's all of this and more. It's food and food production and gardens and water and rethinking, reconnecting to to the hydrology that existed before the city perhaps was developed. It certainly is different new civic spaces that incorporate green, but it's also, again, habitat, and it's lighting. It's all those things that could enhance and sometimes get in the way of connections with the natural world. And I sometimes think of this as scale fitting. We're working at multiple scales when we envision a biophilic city. Last week it was mainly in the middle, but we know that even when we're talking about a neighborhood, we're also very interested in codes. So something that happens in a neighborhood might be mandated or encouraged or subsidized by a city ordinance. Equally true that there are many individual building design elements that could be important in buildings that are an important part of a biophilic neighborhood. By the way, Mohawk, that's image at the top right, is a carpet. Mohawk Carpet has a new carpet line based around Richard Taylor's fractal designs. So it's basically taking that fractal science and applying it to products, in this case, carpet. So in the time that I have left, I want to just quickly, it sounds like I'm going to have to start to go to my photo essay portion of the night, and I'm just going to maybe go a little bit faster if the slides will let me, if the computer will let me. So we also think of a biophilic city as an outdoor city, right? So we haven't been spending very much of our evolutionary history in a room like this one where we're inside. We know, though, that 90% of our day is spent inside. How do we get outside? And there's a tremendous opportunity at the urban level. So Edmonton, Canada is one of our partner cities, and they have developed a winter strategy, a series of things to get people outside during the winter, including things to see. So they design and construct an ice castle every winter. You've got to get outside and see that, right? There are winter design guidelines, actually. Where do we need windbreaks? Where do we need warming stations? What are the physical design elements, actually, that might facilitate outside activity? And lots of cities have freeways. Edmonton talks about freezeways, the idea of being able to skate maybe from your home to work. And actually, this is an idea that some cities, Chicago has recently adopted the idea. This is Richmond, and Richmond is now, Virginia has joined our network. Wonderful story here of a riverfront master plan, a whole series of interventions to foster more connection to this wild river. This is a river that has class 4 rapids and really wild nature just a few hundred feet from downtown. And wonderfully creative pedestrian bridges and spaces for actually literally touching the water. This is Portland, Oregon. So they have been pioneering this idea of green streets. These are portions of roadways and sometimes a little bit of sidewalk to create bioswales and rain gardens. And so really important from a stormwater management point of view, but also bringing nature into neighborhoods where it's needed. There are now more than 2,000 of these green streets, resilient and multifunctional. I have too many of these sort of multi-part slides, don't I? So they're actually. So a lot of this is how do you create the possibilities not only for ecological connections but human connections, and that means the best cities are investing in those opportunities to walk, hike, engage nature outside. This is images of Singapore's wonderful connectors, park connectors, a 300-kilometer network, some of it actually moving through canopy, forest canopy level. San Francisco, another story, they've just gone through this amazing 30-year anniversary, double anniversary for the Bay Trail. That's 2/3 complete, and the Bay Ridge Trail, which is a parallel trail. 2 different organizations, 2 different efforts at creating regional trail, 500 miles for each. When it's done, in about 10 years probably, there will be 1,000 miles of regional trails in San Francisco, connecting to all kinds of local trails as well. Vitoria-Gasteiz, the capital of the Basque Country, is one of our partner cities. Also, wonderful story of they're known for their green ring that circles the city, and now they are moving to bring the green ring into the center. So an interior green ring. That sounds a little funny, doesn't it? But that's how they speak of it. And this was a stream that was in a pipe underground, and they brought it back to the surface, and they've created wonderful space for connecting to nature, but strolling and being outside as well. So just a few slides, I think, in the time I have left. This is a little bit dated, but just to give you a little sense of the different cities. As I say, we have 22 cities so far. And there is a set of criteria for joining the network. One of the things you have to do is have a city council adopted resolution or proclamation. This is Mayor Peduto, the mayor of Pittsburgh, receiving his certificate. I often show up, and there's usually a celebratory event. We often get good publicity around it as well. So the application asks cities to take stock of the ways that they already are biophilic and to identify future goals and targets. So we do lots of things in the network, and we use lots of mechanisms for sharing information. There's an online journal called Biophilic Cities that I mentioned, and actually this is Bosco Verticali on the cover. It's not the most recent issue. So we do that. I think I've mentioned we make films. We have city-to-city exchanges. So the ones, this is San Francisco actually hosting a delegation from Singapore. They wanted to come and learn about bird-friendly design. And as I said, San Francisco has the first U.S. Ordinance. So they've been kind of a pioneer. There are lots of resources, lots of books, and this is the most recent book of cases. If you're interested with chapters about Singapore and Wellington, New Zealand, and Milwaukee and Portland, and especially our 10 sort of initial pioneer partner cities, if you will. Okay, and there's a Chinese translation of that. So we do lots of different events, but one of the things that we've been doing recently, a collaboration with Steve and Serenbe and the Biophilic Institute at Serenbe. So this year it's late April, but it's 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 days, isn't it?
3 days.
3 days. Third week in April. Steve does this wonderful walk, multiple walks, I think, of Serenbe, and we think of Serenbe as a wonderful example of a biophilic community. Maybe the last thing I'll say is that we are trying to understand, lessons from the best cities, and we're doing that through films and filmmaking and through the Biophilic Cities journal. Webinars, and we've actually had a Biophilic Cities Summit in Singapore in October, so we're actually bringing the cities together. We have monthly partner calls of all of these cities, which gets to be a challenge with time zone differences, but we try to mix it up. So we are aspiring to many more cities in the network, 30, 40, 50, 100. We think this is such a powerful vision and set of ideas. And this is kind of one of the latest projects. We've just started a kind of crowdsourced, what we're calling a global biophilic patterns book, essentially. So inspired by Chris Alexander's idea of pattern language, that that there are kind of ancient patterns of building and placemaking, and so every city in our network has unique patterns of nature, unique relationships with nature, but also unique interventions. And so everything from, for example, in Paris, they are planting trees, street trees, but they're also understanding the space around the base of that tree as a garden. So they don't call them tree gardens. We call them tree gardens. So we're creating a whole global pattern book, really, around these unique and different and special things that we're finding in cities. Okay, I think that's it, but thank you very much. So, okay.